I am Richard Dunn from Evoker. In this part we're going to build on our fire by creating the embers. So the best way to do this, it's very simple. The material for it is incredibly basic. So what we're going to do is first of all get ourselves back in the screen. I'm just going to minimize this. We're going to jump back in here and I'm just going to shut down the fire material. We're just going to save our package and also just going to save all levels. And we're going to create a new material. And we'll call this M_Embers. M for matte. And it's a material. So we'll OK that. And we now have our new material open in here. So what we want to do is we want to save our material, and we're going to use this frame clamp as our texture. So I'm just going to drag this down here and drag in our embers material. And just like before, we just want to simply give this the ability to be colored and plug it in. That's all it's going to be. The embers virtually cost nothing. So what we're going to do is we're just going to set this to blend additive and unlit, and we're just going to simply do the same thing as I said before. We're just going to multiply this into emissive. We don't even need opacity for this one or transparency, because the black will, because it's additive, the black will automatically not render. So we're just going to plug that into A and a vertex color into B. That's our ember material finished. As you can see, that's what it looks like. Save it, shut it, and all we want to do now is get our material into our particle. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we've got fire. Let's create a new particle sprite emitter. Let's give it a name and we'll call this embers or sparks, whatever you want. Like so. Now you can see the emitters there, but the fire is getting in the way. So we can disable the fire simply by clicking on this here. And now we have just our embers in view. And just like before, we need to select our material. We'll shut that. We need our material, which is here. And while it's selected, okay, so we're just assigning our material to the embers particle. And we have our embers. And obviously they're too slow, they're too big. So we need to do some work on these. So the first thing that obviously is wrong with this are the size. So let's go into initial size, and as you can see they're rendering at 25. So we don't need X and Y, sorry, we don't need Z, because we're only dealing with the width and the height of the sprites. So we can set those to 0. And we'll try these values. We'll go 2 and 5. On the min, we'll go 0.5 and 4. So we've now got some embers. flying up into the air. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is, like we did with the fire, we want to control the area that they're spawning from. So we're going to come into here and we're going to go location, cylinder. And as you can see now, we have almost a reverse snow. So what we're going to do here is set this to, so we'll just turn on draw mode for this so we can actually see it. Find a value that works. Let's try 5, no, 20, 30, no. Let's try it with the fire on, get a sense. No. Alright, we'll turn off draw mode. Yeah, that's not too bad. I don't mind that. Okay, so we're done with the cylinder. Now let's look at color over life and try and get these sparks to match the color of the fire a little better. Okay, so what we're going to do is drag this over a little bit so we can see it. And we'll just clear these. And color over life. And we'll graph it. We don't want that one. And we're going to come in here and we're going to set all these to 0. And then we'll come down to the second one and we'll set that to about 0.3, and we'll set these colors to a really nice color to try and simulate the color of the embers. So we'll go 25, 10, and about 2. As you can see, these have now got a subtle glow to them. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add another point, a bit like we did with the alpha over life for the fire, so that the flame was fading in and then full strength and then fading out. So we're going to do a similar thing here. So we're going to add another point, and we're just going to set that in value to 1. And let's just pull this up so we can see it a bit better. And now you can see most of our colour is red. So we've got red, green and blue. So what we're going to do first of all is just auto curve all these, just to get the nice smooth tangents. Let's turn off just the red for now. So we've got just the red, I should say. And just the green. This is just a way of hiding so you can see what you're doing, because it does get a little bit hard to see what you're doing sometimes. And what we can do is we can actually break this up even more. You don't have to stick with this. You can hold down Control and click and add just another point in there and just blow this out. You don't have to accept the defaults, not by any stretch of the imagination. So what we've done there is effectively just added it a bit more random colour to it. As you can see now, the colours are fading out at different times. What we'll do now is we'll change the number of embers that are being spawned, because obviously, you know, this is just not enough. So we'll come up into spawn. At the moment we only have a constant value. We want to be able to have a min and max. So again, we'll go float uniform and we'll type in, say, 5 and let's say 40. just to give it some more variation, like that. Next thing we'll deal with is the lifetime. So obviously these are all living for the same amount of time, so we really need to break this up. So let's halve this value to 0.5 and let's set this to 1.5. As you can see now, we've randomized that as well. Okay, so let's tackle the speed now. So we want to go into initial velocity, and let's throw some values in there. Let's say 80 and 80, and let's go minus 80 and minus 80. So you can see right now it's throwing them out in all angles. It's really, now this could be what you want, but we need a little bit more velocity there. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in, say, something like 380, and we'll type in 160. Because the sparks do come off with quite a bit of speed. That looks pretty good actually. So what we've done now is we've set the initial velocity. So basically the starting point, what it's doing when it's born. What we want to do now is we want to add some velocity over life. So we're going to go down into here and we're going to add velocity life. And we're going to come in here and we're going to add a couple of points. And the first point we're going to just set to 0.4, and we'll just set all these to 1. And we'll just set this one to 1, and we'll set these to 0.3. So that's starting to look a bit more realistic, but we're missing some swirling. We're missing the spiraling, circular motion that embers get. So we'll get to that in a second. So what we're going to add now is a size by velocity. What we want them to do is to start stretching, or to actually shrink as they get older. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into we're going to go into size by velocity, and woohoo, it's gone crazy. So what we're going to do is we'll come in here and we'll just start playing with some figures. Now if we go in here and we just bring this up to say 0.5, we really only want to stretch the particle in one axis. So what we'll do is we'll turn off these ones, and you can see now we're starting to get this. Now if we bring this play speed and just try and find a particle, you can see what's happening. Or at least I hope you can. They're stretching and shortening based on their life. Maybe we'll bring that up a bit more. Let's try 0.8. You see how they're getting shorter as they die. So it's simulating motion blur of the particle as it slows down in space. So what we'll do is we'll bring this back to 100%. Just zoom out. You can see we're starting to get the effect that we're after if we turn the fire back on. So now what we want to do is we want to add that spinning. Now there's a module in here called orbit. Now orbit can be very tricky to use. It has a lot of different settings in it and they all work relative to one another. It's a tweaking nightmare. So I'll give you the settings for this, but yeah, I definitely advise you to play with it, get comfortable with it. It's used in potentially any simulation where you have to simulate something moving in a circular fashion. It could be a blizzard with snow, as we'll do later. It could be a tornado, or in this case it could be embers on a vortex coming from the heat of the fire. So what we'll do is we'll come in here and we're going to add orbit. And you can already see what it's starting to do. And the settings are made up of three things. We have the offset, which is essentially the radius of the circle. It's how far is the particle spinning from its center. It's kind of like saying how far is Earth from the sun in its trajectory through around the sun. It's the same kind of thing. The rotation amount and the rotation rate are pretty self-explanatory. The rotation rate is essentially the speed. So if we come into offset, what you can see here is it's saying it's offset 50 on Y. And if you look at Y in here, it's basically saying this is the point here that we're spinning around, and we come out 50 units and it's spinning around like this in the flat plane horizontally. If we had it spinning around Z, it would be spinning this way. So we want to give it the effect of random rotation in all three axes. So what we want to do really is just type in something like 30, 30, and 30. And you can see there we now have this swirling. So we'll leave that one there and we'll come down to rotation amount. Now rotation amount is what percentage of a 360 degree circle are they spinning? Are they spinning 45 degrees, or are they spinning a full 180 half, or are they doing a full 360 circular spin? And of course again we have min and max. So this does take some getting used to, and really the best way is to just experiment. The way this is set up right now with 1 and 0, that is 360 degrees. Its minimum arc is 0 and its maximum is 1, and 1 represents 360. Obviously if they were 0.5, they would only do a half arc. So we're going to leave those where they are and we're going to come down to rotation rate. Now with these numbers here in the rotation rate, positive numbers are clockwise. So at the moment everything's pretty uniform and all moving in a clockwise fashion, like water going down the drain. It's all going in one direction. So what we want to do is try and break that up by throwing in some negatives. So we'll type in something like 0.4, 0.4, and we'll say minus 0.4 and minus 0.4, and then we'll type in say 1.5 and minus 1.5 for the speed. Now, you know, this is all very subtle, but it adds to the realism, and the devil's in the details. It's one of the things that make these effects believable, is attention to detail. And once we've done that, that pretty much wraps up the embers. I mean, There are more things that we could do to this in the shader. We could potentially add a sine wave to the glowing of the embers so that they pulse. We could also add some dynamic parameters like we did in the fire to control the randomization of the movement and the size and the glowing and everything else. But this is all adding to the instruction count. As it is right now, we have an ember that's behaving fairly reasonably and is nearly free. It really has no cost. And if you look at it in here, as you can see, they're not really contributing anything as far as overdraw goes. The fire, we have all this blue overdraw around the flames, but the embers themselves, because they're only got this little black border, they virtually have nothing. So they're an effect that you can get that's really, really cheap. And in saying that, you can also use this technique for things like bugs or fireflies or anything else. And you know, they are incredibly efficient. They're the sort of thing you can put in a scene at virtually no cost. So in the next video, when we come back, we will start to tackle the smoke. That is on par with the fire. So we'll first off do creating the smoke texture, which we'll do by extracting it from a cloud, and then we're going to put together the particle effect, the material and the particle effect for it, and then after that we'll do the heat distortion effect, which are 2 more particles. So we'll see you when you come back.